Hi everyone, again, welcome to episode 2 of looking at the Niagara Aerospace Museum and the P-39 Miss Lend-Lease. Thanks for your support again, and we welcome Dave back as well.
Thank you, Shane.
Yes, absolutely. So right now we are sitting in, this is kind of a unique museum here because we are sitting in, say, a gate when this was the Niagara Falls Airport. And so behind us, you probably see the reflections is a large window, and we're looking out on the tarmac. And we talked a little bit about that in the first episode, with that causes some concern to the staff and volunteers here about the degradation of the Miss Lend-Lease as well. We ended episode 1 looking at that very dramatic photo of Miss Lend-Lease being raised out of a lake in northwestern Russia. And so now, David, let's pick up the story from there.
Okay, this is the photo we're talking about. And this is our aircraft. You can still see the serial number on the tail. It belonged to White Unit 23. And that's what was happening on November the 19th, 1944. A Russian pilot by the name of Ivan Baranovsky, second lieutenant in the Russian Air Force, was flying a supply mission. That was part of his unit, Supply Unit 23. They were going to supply a forward base that they had just captured from the Germans, an air base. And so Ivan takes off that day, and part of what happened here is during mid-flight, the last transmission from the aircraft is the word port, which in nautical terms is left. And that's all we know for the next 60 years, until the summer of 2004, when Miss Lend-Lease, that's what we call her now, just the tip of the tail is sticking out of the water, and a Russian fisherman fishing what's called Lake Mart, Yavr, that's in northwest Russia. He saw the tip of the tail sticking out of the water. He alerted authorities to the fact that there's a World War II aircraft in our lake. And as a result of that, that sets in motion the retrieval of our aircraft from that lake. Eventually, we are able to purchase her and retrieve her, and now she is back home as of April the 1st, 2009, in the ownership of our museum. So the bigger question, Shane, is what happened? What happened to this, to our aircraft? What happened to Ivan Baranovsky? And that's what we're going to get into today.
Great, I look forward to it. This is such a well-documented, even though there might be gaps, it's still such a well-documented story. And I know our viewers and subscribers will be interested in that. So I noticed that when we were doing the walk around, it does not actually show the tail as much here. Was there some part missing?
Well, the whole entire tail section was missing. That's been reconstructed. And the sad part here is, if you look at the tail closely, it's fabric, and yet this aircraft was all metal when it came off the production line. So that's a recreation, if you will.
But it's an okay recreation. Yes, absolutely.
Much better than not having that tail section at all.
All right, very good. Yes, so let's hear more about the fate of Second Lieutenant Ivan and just his last archaic communication of port.
Okay, so without knowing too much, when we pulled this aircraft out of the water, now as a museum member, I have access to our storage area where we can begin to understand a little bit about what happened to Ivan. Any initial thoughts to maybe why this aircraft went down?
Could it have, now I might not be technical with this, Dave, but could it be that he was having a malfunction? It wasn't maybe like a malfunction in the air where he crashed, or was he trying to land? I'm interested in hearing that, if there is a difference between an accident while flying and crashing, or recognizing that there's something, and then trying to land, and maybe that happens during the landing.
Well, that's a good thought. As a pilot, you might also consider maybe running out of fuel.
Okay.
You might consider a weather event that might have caused him to turn left to avoid weather,
Oh.
or a malfunction, an aircraft malfunction, maybe something like the engine on this aircraft. This is a side view of the engine that was pulled out of this aircraft, and if you look closely, you can see two holes.
Yes.
This in the engine, where two pistons exited this aircraft engine.
And we're speaking right here.
Those are the two holes,
Wow,
right, that
here
you
and
can
here.
see in this. So obviously, right, he had an engine failure. Maybe yes and maybe no. So here's where we get into some more details about this aircraft. This is the wing of our aircraft. And if you look carefully, there is a section right here, the leading edge. This is the trailing edge, and the leading edge, front edge of the wing of this P-39. And it has a gaping hole. From here, it's about 6 foot long. And we know from the aircraft log that this was a repair that had been done to this wing. And when Ivan was flying, the last transmission says port. And the speculation is, based on the analysis, the metal analysis on the wing section here, we don't actually have the repaired section. That was lost or never found. It indicates some really wear and tear on the wing section that indicates that this was coming undone. The repair that the Russians had done, and we're not going to be too not demeaning on the Russians, who were notoriously poor on repair, not just this aircraft, but
Sure.
generally, a general statement was that the Russians were not really good at maintenance or repairing. So our best guess is that this particular aircraft was, maybe this repair was coming undone, and aerodynamically, that would cause a lot of friction, or what's called drag, on the leading edge, which is what might indicate why Ivan would be turning left.
Is this the port side wing?
This is the starboard.
Okay.
side. This is the right wing.
Okay.
But that's going to cause enough of a drag that you want to turn your aircraft this way to keep that wing upright. So now what happens is that Ivan is now faced with a decision. This is the best we can piece this together. And there's an old saying, actually two, sort of a mantra for pilots when they're learning to fly. One is, let me get this straight. The only good landing is a landing that you can walk away from. There is no such thing as a bad landing. And the only other mantra saying that you have that a lot of pilots will repeat is that there are old pilots, there are bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots.
Oh, I like that. So there's old pilots, there's bold pilots, but you won't have old and bold
Right.
at the same time.
Right. And
Why presumably is that?
so that's why, as an old pilot myself,
Oh,
I'm in that general persuasion that says, do be cautious, do be careful, minimize your risks. And so I think that's what was going through Ivan's head at the time he decided to make a precautionary landing. With this wing section coming undone, he's looking for a spot to put his aircraft down. So he's looking around. He's in northwestern Russia, north of the Arctic Circle.
oh, wow.
This is November, middle of November. It's wintry. He's about 40 miles from the Norway-Finland border. So Ivan spots a lake called Lake Mart, Yavr, and he's thinking to himself, I'll just put my aircraft down, and then somehow I'll be able to communicate this to our to whatever unit he belongs to, and he'll be rescued or saved. All right.
So, well, can you explain a little bit more about potentially that lake situation. Now, it is November, it's probably iced over, but would that have been an only spot that is now flat? And we have an airplane taking off here, folks, so is that like maybe the ground was rugged or mountainous and that now becomes like this nice...
I have looked at the geography of the area. It is rugged, it is wooded, and especially at that particular time. This is a remote lake. It's a small remote lake, and it still has that characteristic today. So knowing that, and knowing Ivan's sort of immediate need to look for a place to land, he decides, or he chooses this very small lake. And his thinking at that time was, yes, it's probably iced over, and maybe I can use this as a place to land. So from there on in, I think the pieces start to fit together. When we find this aircraft on the lake, some things that you can begin to notice. First of all, the prop is bent. If you look at this, it's bent backwards.
You can see that very clearly.
Which means that the aircraft was still, the engine was functioning. So we're going to discount the fact that we have 2 pistons missing from this engine.
Interesting.
Why? Because when he landed on this lake, it was a matter of wheels up, he's going to land on a solid surface, and with that propeller, with that engine still generating power, that's why those props are spent backwards. Something else that we also notice,
yes,
the doors are closed.
Okay,
If Ivan wanted to bail out because the emergency was immediate, he could have released those doors by a special mechanism, and he could have bailed out. That did not happen because as we pulled this aircraft out of the lake, Ivan's remains are still inside.
Okay, so in 2000...
What remained of his remains?
In 2004, so we're looking at roughly 44 to...
2004 to 2004, 60 years.
60 years.
In other words, 60 years.
Interesting. And so wheels are up.
Wheels are up.
The engine is still going, so you're at discount, but this was a real thing.
Right.
Right? These
and that happened probably
penetrations.
as he tried to land this aircraft generating power, could have put enough stress on the crankshaft of this engine that's why those pistons came through the casing. Now something else that we also know about this, Ivan was not wearing a harness, much like today's seat belts. If you're not wearing your seat belt, you're going to have a problem, okay? Why was Ivan not wearing his seat belt or his harness? And that's because at that particular time, Russian pilots were known to release their seat belts flying these P-39s because, as you could see earlier, the cockpit was a very small, confined area. And if you're looking for enemy aircraft as you're trying to land a disabled aircraft, that's probably why Ivan had released his harness. And so when he hit that solid ice, not only did the props bend, but now Ivan was thrust forward, where best guess is he hit his head on this very small cockpit instrument panel, and whether he had a concussion, whether he passed out temporarily unconscious, or whether he died as a result of that. That's why we think that the story behind this is that for 60 years, Ivan was trying to get back to his base. He never made it because of this malfunction or this repair that was coming undone. And likewise, also, the fact that he was thinking he was going to survive this landing, that's why he landed the way that he did. And sadly, Ivan did not survive. Thankfully, we have this aircraft to reconstruct the entire story here. Post pulling this aircraft out of the water, Ivan was given a military funeral with honors by Russia, and then our museum purchased this aircraft, and now it's back home where it was originally produced in 1944.
But still telling that story of the fate of the pilot, and that's such a great story, and it embroiders the story a little bit more of the plane, that you're able to have port as the last communication. You have the penetrations or excavations, I guess, of the pistons, the bent propeller, potentially why he chose to land on a lake given the landscape around him. I mean, that really is...
And we're trying to be sort of historical detectives this way. NTSB today would be called to an accident. They didn't have NTSB in Russia at that particular time. So we're using the clues, again, that Miss Lease is telling us.
Yes.
She's giving us all the information that we need to know to put the final edge on this story.
Well, this is a fabulous story. We hope that you enjoyed it out there, viewers and subscribers. So this will wrap up episode 2 of the fate of the pilot and the fate of the plane and where she rested for 60 years until finally being retrieved in 2004, being brought here in April of 2009. As David says, the rightful place where Miss Lease belongs. Thanks again for your support. Thanks again to David and the Niagara Aerospace Museum. And again, I'll link their website in our description below. And you know what? We'll see you again very soon, everybody. And thanks again, David.
More than welcome, Shane. We're glad we can do this.